Only one team can win 19 of 21 games out of the Power Four, and America just not talk about it. Is this the most disrespected team in college football? And is it the BYU Cougars? This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. And if you're not, you're probably making that guy, Jake Hatch, your first listen every day with Locked On Cougars. We will start BYU, the most disrespected team in the country. They feel like America's forgotten team. They won 19 of 21. If you do that, like in Indiana or at Ohio State, typically there's more respect and attention than what BYU is getting. Why? Then, what does this game mean for the Big 12? A new school Big 12 squad in the top 10, leading the conference, going on the road against an old school Big 12 squad, and America is watching. Is that good or bad for the future of the Big 12? And finally, Aaron Roderick, I'm sorry. I owe him a Christmas gift. I owe him a card, at least something, an invite, one of those round, circular cinnamon rolls. I'll send him something. My bad, A-Rod. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Hatch, 19 of 21, man. That's what I've heard thrown around a lot here recently, but the country still is not talking about BYU. Does this feel like the most forgotten elite team in college football?
In some ways, yes, because here's the thing, Drake. We just saw Curt Cignetti get $93 million. Do you know what Indiana's record over the last 21 games is?
Probably like 19-2.
19-2. So
yeah.
Here's the thing. BYU, they got left out of the college football playoff last year, despite having, I thought, a very, very strong argument to be included in the field, including a head-to-head win over a college football playoff participant in the SMU Mustangs. So yeah, this team, they have thrived off of being disrespected, being an underdog multiple times this season against teams that are lower than them in the rankings, including this week, even though it's one spot difference against the Texas Tech Red Raiders. So yeah, this team in many respects does feel like it's been disrespected, overlooked, and I think that they are looking for some modicum of respect, and they could get that this week with a win in Lubbock.
Yeah, certainly with the top 10 win on the road, BYU would then get the respect of moving up one spot. It feels like the AP voters that anybody voting in these polls, they're not really budging on the SEC at the top of college football until somebody loses, even if, and you saw it with Georgia Tech last week. Even if the resume of a BYU is better, Georgia Tech got to have a higher spot because they were ranked higher before that. Do you think that there's more? What is more at play here? Is it conference affiliation or overall brand that has kept BYU from being the belle of the ball nationally when you turn your TV on as a 19-2 team?
I think the bigger thing is for BYU is they're an international brand. You and I both know this, Drake, just due to their affiliation with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that obviously draws fans from all over the place. For the example, Monday night, BYU basketball played in Las Vegas, and multiple national reporters were like, man, BYU took over this place. Well, guess what? There are Cougar fans in droves that live in the greater Vegas area that drove over to that game. A lot of them drove from Utah as well. BYU fans show up in droves wherever they play on the road. But to your bigger point, I think, Drake, is that BYU is considered new blood at this level of college football. They are always that plucky underdog. That school is out there in the mountains in the Western United States that flung the ball all over the field. They won a national title in 1984 that essentially forced the powers that be that would slam that door shut to ensure that would never happen again. That's what gave rise to the College Football Bowl Alliance, the BCS, and ultimately the College Football Playoff. It's because BYU won a national title in spite of Blue Bloods trying to shut them out of doing that. So I think that there's a little bit of BYU's always kind of outdone itself with regards to the level it's played at, the way it's perceived, because it's perceived to be a quirky university that's this Mormon school out there. Well, all they've done is win. So maybe at some point the national media will show up and say, hey, Cougars, let's give them the benefit of the doubt here. But you're right, a win this weekend would help a lot.
So a piece of this, I mentioned, the Big 12 affiliation for BYU and how that could hurt or help because the SEC, as we know, gets touted a whole lot more than the Big 12 conference does. And I'm not sure if we're ever going to change that. But maybe a better question, did BYU fans expect to walk into the Big 12 and be given more national respect because of this affiliation than what they're getting?
I don't necessarily think that was the case. I think BYU has aspired for decades to be at the level they're at. Drake, trust me, there have been rumors about BYU flirting with what was in the Pac-10 in the 1990s, and then obviously chasing Power 4, Power 5 affiliation throughout the 2010s when they were an independent football program. They have wanted to be at this level they're at for literally decades, and I don't think they walked in thinking, hey, we're the big cheese now, give us the respect. I think they wanted to earn it over time, but the fact that they've been so successful relatively early on in their Power 4 affiliation days, I think that has entitled them to a little bit more respect than they're getting right now.
Certainly, I think more respect is warranted. Have you seen since joining the Big 12, this happened to another team at the same level where you think, I wish I was them, we wish we had that kind of respect? Or again, can we deduce that the Big 12 conference as a whole is just not getting their flowers nationally?
I think that your second point there is just the Big 12 is just getting panned, it feels like, because let's be honest, the Fox is in bed with the Big 10, ESPN's in bed with the SEC. Who does the Big 12 have affiliation with? Well, both of those networks. And the simple fact of the matter is, when you're in bed with one of these networks or the other, they're always going to be the pride and joy because you want to pump up that other conference, whereas the Big 12 is that redheaded stepchild to a degree. So I do think that the conference affiliation and the lack of having a national partner that wants to promote them at all costs, it seems like, is hurting BYU in the Big 12.
It's a problem overall, the way that this thing has panned out, and as far as Big 12 coverage goes, and maybe TNT can be a player if Fox feels like that it can step up and do a little bit more with the conference. They could be a player. ESPN giving College Game Day to the Big 12 2 weekends in a row is at least a step in the right direction. Having games like this, top 10 matchups between BYU and Texas Tech, and the hope that the playoff committee or the AP poll will not bump either team that loses, because you're either going to have a 2-loss Texas Tech team that just lost to a top 10 opponent, or a 1-loss BYU team that lost a top 10 game on the road. But as we know, those polls are swayed when the SEC logos and brands are near the top. Coming up, that game, let's go in depth on it. From injury reports to the magnitude in Big 12 history. BYU, Texas Tech, complete breakdown here on Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars crossover. First, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is exactly where I go during the NBA season. If you're watching the Utah Jazz, Keontae George, there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game, want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything, who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. FanDuel is exactly where to be. Go to FanDuel.com. Do it today. Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars. I want to talk about the magnitude of the game between BYU and Texas Tech and this new era of Big 12 play with 16 teams and how this game affects the conference's standing amongst the country. But first, maybe the biggest storyline that I've heard between two fan bases, Texas Tech and BYU, that really know ball, is injuries. BYU, an extra week to get healthy, to rest LJ Martin in the depth chart. Then Texas Tech, seems like every week, a couple times, Jacob Rodriguez has been a little banged up. You're wondering from the defensive line standpoint, is Tech as strong as they were 5-6 weeks ago? From your assessment, are we getting the best of these two teams or a pieced together version of this game?
I think you're getting close to it. I'll tell you, BYU against Iowa State, Drake, came out of the game just absolutely beat up. I'm talking from Bear Bachmeier to Jack Kelly to Isaiah Glasker to Tanner Wall to LJ Martin. Obviously, all of them needed some time off. And that extra week, that bye week, was much needed for the BYU football program because they had an early bye. It was a week, 2 or 3, whatever it was. And they played a lot of games in the interim after that first bye. They needed a break. But Texas Tech, they got Baron Morton back. Very much looks like at the peak of his powers. You mentioned Jacob Rodriguez. We'll see what happens with regards to his status, but still have David Bailey. They still got maybe the best two edge rushers tandem in the entire Big 12, if not the country. So I think we're getting as close as you possibly could hope for as we kick off the month of November here with these two teams.
And you need the best of these two on the football field to showcase what the Big 12 can do. And I think Jacob Rodriguez has consistently gotten healthier. Like there are blips for everybody in college football where you wonder, okay, can you continue to do it? And when the guy's got, I think it's 74 tackles and 7 forced fumbles alone right now, like, yeah, it's going to hurt. It's not going to feel very good. He's got video game numbers and deserves to be in the Heisman conversation. And that's just another one of the many storylines we're going to get Saturday. Heisman caliber linebacker versus true freshman quarterback, and College Game Day is here. Yeah. Is a top 10 matchup between Texas Tech and BYU indicative of what the future of the Big 12 is?
I sure hope so, because the nice part is you already kind of referred to it. It's kind of the old guard versus the new guard here, because we have 8 holdovers from the old Big 12 conference. And now you have 8 newcomers over the past 2 years who have joined this league, or 3 years, I should say. And the nice part is you're watching some of that new blood in BYU going up against one of the OGs in the Texas Tech Red Raiders. They're two fan bases that you mentioned, no ball. They love their teams, and they're in. They're locked in with their diehards. And I love the fact that these are two bigger brands, if not the biggest brands in the Big 12 conference, because you look at what they're doing in NIL, their capability of spending money and bringing in top tier talent, both coaching and player wise. This is a really, really fun game to have on the national radar, because I truly believe it's the game of the week. It's getting the College Game Day experience. Herb Street and those guys are calling the game. So, yeah, it's a fun spectacle to be a part of.
We keep saying biggest game of the year, and it could have been Utah versus Texas Tech. It could have been BYU and Utah. It could have been Utah and Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Were all of those hyperbolic biggest games of the year when compared to Texas Tech and BYU truly earning that moniker?
I think hyperbolic might be too strong of a term, but they were big games. They were intersectional games, is probably the term I would use along the path here. But when you have the two appears to be best teams in the league going head-to-head, national game, as I mentioned, with 2 top 10 teams, I don't need to mention this to BYU fans, because I've already talked about it ad nauseum. This is the first time, Drake, in BYU's 101 years of playing football, that they're playing a fellow top 10 team in a football game. This is history for BYU, and it's in some ways kind of history for this new look Big 12. Having 2 teams on the national stage are going to duke it out, and whoever wins it very much is probably going to be in the driver's seat to win the Big 12 conference, but it also could set up a potential title rematch in Arlington, Texas in a month's time, which could also be maybe a second game of the year, if you want to call it that.
Here's a hard question. This question is probably more for me than it is you.
That's okay.
BYU and Texas Tech squaring off in the biggest game in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. Would it have been more advantageous for this conference if recency bias is at play at a school like Kansas State, who has a recent Big 12 championship, and say Oklahoma State, who was in that title a couple years ago against Texas? If K-State and Oklahoma State were both top 10 teams, if they get to flip spots and BYU and Texas Tech are, is that better? I'm going to add an addendum to this. Is it better for the conference? Reason being, BYU, obviously the new blood of the Big 12, hasn't won a Big 12 championship, and they were 5-7 year one. And for most of the country, it's, that's that new Big 12 school. And for Texas Tech, they haven't won a Big 12 championship ever. And so, we're looking at 2 teams that are, once again, this is the changing of the guard in conference play, where we keep talking about 2 more teams, 2 new teams that are in the Big 12 championship year in and year out. Would it have helped the conference more if you built mainstays out of Oklahoma State and Kansas State who felt like they were at the top?
In some ways, but let's be honest, those fan bases pale in what I consider to be consideration of what BYU and Texas Tech bring in terms of their fan bases. That's just my personal opinion on the matter, and I'm obviously biased because, I cover BYU. I went to BYU. I get all that, but I look at it as these are 2 programs, and I talked with Chris Level, our good friend from Locked On Texas Tech, earlier this week. We talked about BYU and Texas Tech being 2 of the bigger brands that in some ways have bought their way to the top, and that's going to sound really, really bad. There's going to be some fan bases, Utah, who are going to want to clip that and use that as ammo. But the bigger point is Cody Campbell wants to see Texas Tech at the top tier of college football, and he's doing his absolute darndest to help them do that. BYU, they've got people like Ryan Smith, et cetera, who are doing the exact same thing. They are boosters who want to see their programs succeed at the highest levels, and they're willing to spend cash to do just that. If people want to be upset about that, go right on ahead. But I love the fact we've got 2 newcomers, in a way, doing what they're doing on the national stage.
Yeah, I think overall, because of the size of the fan bases, this is good for the Big 12. And a big piece of that comes from in Manhattan, Kansas. the same as it is in Ames, Iowa. It is much tougher to be able to facilitate high-level college football. That's not a knock whatsoever on those fan bases. In Kansas, you're splitting time with not just pro teams, and Utah certainly has that. No football, not football, but in Kansas, you get to split time with the Chiefs. And also, I mean, you're looking at these people who, I mean, it's like I consider myself this when I was a kid in Arkansas. Like, it was an honor to go to a Razorback football game. It was hard. Like, Dad had worked extra hard this week to go. Ticket prices and everything stacked against you in Manhattan, Kansas. It is tough to cheer for a team, especially one that is 4-4. So I don't want to say the fan base is worse at Kansas State, but they're at a larger disadvantage, or at Oklahoma State, but they're at a larger disadvantage, just as passionate as Texas Tech and BYU, but a larger disadvantage because of regional factors to the painful, gross growth of college football where it's going, whereas Texas Tech is not even really in Texas. They're in West Texas, which is its own state. It's why the state is so big. You can get from El Paso, the furthest western point of Texas, you can get to LA faster than you can get the furthest eastern point of Texas. It's this whole, you have to cut the thing in half, and Tech gets its own little side of the state over there. So they get to rule. It's all, they even say it, it's all West Texas. They get to have that. For BYU, it is the flagship university of one of the fastest growing faiths in the world. You know, like there are more factors stacked against other schools in the Big 12. And I asked Jesse Holley this, the Dallas Cowboy, a few weeks ago, you know, it seems kind of unfair. And he goes, it is. Life's unfair. BYU is going to have an easier time building in this era of college football. So is Texas Tech, than Oklahoma State and Kansas State. So maybe it's better ultimately that you start building your foundation on these two schools.
You're right. And that's the thing about this. You got two engaged fan bases who want nothing more, as I mentioned, than to see their program succeed at the highest levels. As I mentioned, BYU has spent 4+ decades since they won a national title, hoping to be at the level they're at and having that door open to winning another national title. Drake, I'm not going to predict that BYU is going to go out there and win it this season because the odds are stacked against them. Let's just be honest about that. But they want to have that door open. It is open to them again. And they've got boosters who are ultra motivated to help BYU succeed at a high level. And you're right. The faith-based element of BYU helps it because they literally have a following literally worldwide because of the members of the LDS faith. And I know there's Utah fans out there. Well, we're members of it. I get that. But guess what? The affiliation with the church lies with Brigham Young University. So it is, I think, a really, really good sign to watch a guy like Cody Campbell, who is a multi-billionaire multiple times over, who is the chairman of the board of regents for Texas Tech University. That's a great guy to have leading the way for you to build what you're building. And the fact that he has the influence of, Congress, the president of the United States and the like, that doesn't hurt either.
No doubt. This is the new era of Big 12 football, BYU and Texas Tech. Coming up, Aaron Roderick, the offensive coordinator at BYU, my king. I'm sorry. Locked on Big 12, Locked on Cougars. Hat off. Hand up. My bad. There are, I think, like 2 or 3 Locked on Big 12 titles in the last 2 years that say fire Aaron Roderick or some version of that lingo. And man, after not just the Iowa State game where you lose LJ Martin, you're starting running back, and have to turn Bear Bachmeier into Superman, and somehow as an OC meticulously craft an offense mid-game without your star running back that is both conducive to a freshman quarterback but gives Bear Bachmeier the ability to go out there and be a star and win the game. Like, not only that, but he's doing it week in and week out, battling injuries and 18, 19-year-old quarterback, the Retzlaff situation, the wake of that, building an offense. Aaron Roderick should go from Locked on Big 12's most fired to Broyles award-winning candidate. I think what he has done as an OC this year cannot be overlooked. And there may be a couple BYU fans who are like, ooh, reluctantly, yes. But it's hard to deny at this point.
Well, so Drake, I have had my real estate built on Roderick Island, to call it that, for a long time. And you and I have talked about this a lot. And trust me, I know I was sent the screenshots of the titles you put out there. I was on the kind of the opposite side of the gulf. I've always been an Aaron Roderick fan. I've always believed that he is very capable at what he's doing. And I'm not trying to call you out here, but what he's proving is he's a very good offensive mind. And I know that he's had a bad rap from some of the failures of the past, but you can't argue with what he's done with his quarterbacks. He's put 3 of them in the NFL. He's got a guy like Bear Bachmeier, who's a true freshman, looks like he might be the next great thing in Provo, Utah, a school that is very, very well versed in top tier quarterback play. So yeah, he deserves his flowers, his laurels. He deserves some apologies as well along the way.
It's me. I'm apologizing to A-Rod, and based on what he's put together this year, I think like Bear Bachmeier has 9 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
That takes a combination of like cojones, serious cojones, and trust in a freshman QB to run him the way that Roderick has in both design runs and to trust when the pocket breaks down. Bear, you have the green light. Go carry Utah football players into the end zone and score a touchdown if able. It's what maybe give me a little bit of grace here. What was I missing a year ago, whether it was the Kansas game or the Arizona State game? What was the country and the BYU fans who wanted him gone? What were they missing?
It was failures in the red zone. But I say this all the time, Drake. Coaches call plays, players make said plays. And Jake Retzloff, I think he's a fine quarterback. I use the term all the time. He was a good quarterback playing at a university that's used to great or elite quarterbacks. You can look through the history of BYU football. Jim McMahon, Steve Young, Ty Detmer, John Beck, Jaron Hall, Zach Wilson. They have had top-tier quarterback play for literally decades. Jake Retzloff was a good quarterback, but you don't have to look much further than some of the failures he had in the red zone. The 100-yard pick six against Oklahoma in 2023 when look at BYU was finally going to seize control of that game. There were multiple instances a season ago when, a lot of people wanted to put the blame at Aaron Roderick's feet for a bad fade pass thrown by Jake Retzloff in the end zone. Players make plays, Drake. Coaches call said plays, but the other thing is Kalani Sitake. I can tell you that he has said it on the record this season. The most reviled / hated person in BYU is going to be the offensive coordinator, and that's not a recent development. Trust me. Norm Chow is one of the great offensive coordinators in college football history, Drake. And I'm telling you, you can ask anybody who's of a certain age in Cougar Nation that Norm Chow's job seemed to have a referendum on it every single week, even though BYU had a Heisman Trophy winner. They won a national title. What did they want? Hey, we need to get a new offensive coordinator in here. It's par for the course.
Yeah. Again, I'm sorry. This is my big apology to A-Rod. 25th in the country in offensive success. Net EPA per play offensively is 44th in America, and he's doing it with the freshman quarterback and doing it with last week. Effectively, okay, here's another piece of this. There's one running back in the room. And against Iowa State, there were 0 running backs in the room, and not to dilute what Rex can do behind him, but he's not ready yet. Like his day could come. He's not ready yet. And the fact that A-Rod is doing this in different ways week in and week out, maybe the most impressive piece.
Yeah, well, the other thing about this, you go back to that Iowa State game, Drake. I asked Kalani the question in the aftermath of that game, said, hey, did you guys go into halftime essentially and like tear up your playbook and go with a new look offense? He said, well, we have our kind of our base system, and then we just kind of rotated from there. Well, Aaron Roderick said, no, we went into the locker room. We kind of identified what could work, obviously, with a hampered running game is probably the best way to term it, and put together some plays that we felt like, okay, these are our bread and butter. They made a wholesale change in that game. You mentioned the fact they made Bear Bachmeier superhuman. Yeah, he was. 350 of their 400 yards. I'm using round numbers there, but that was the production he put out there, both throwing and running. He was the entire offense, and you don't do that without an offensive coordinator that can get things together on the fly and help you have success. So yeah, it was really cool to see Aaron Roderick earn, I think, some of the more respect that people have been very unwilling to give him. But I'm extending that grace to you, Drake. I don't think that you're alone. Trust me, there are a lot of Cougar fans out there who have some tweets. If I wanted to go dig them up, I'm sure I could find plenty of them that not even earlier this season wanted him out of a job.
Yep. Have we seen the complete, and I know a lot of BYU fans now on the social media apps have come around to this, and they are very big fans of A-Rod. Have we seen the apex of the BYU offense, or is there something, because look, it is formulaic, not the right word, but every week I watch it and I think, ooh, well-timed jet sweep. Ooh, nice speed option. Ooh, Bear Bachmeier running the football. Is there a wrinkle we haven't seen? Anything that makes you think the ceiling is still out there? Or is this a machine that is clicking as it should?
I am thinking that we still have one iteration of this to come, and I think we saw a glimpse of it against Iowa State, and that is a game with a full-fledged passing attack. What BYU has done with Bear Bachmeier, Drake, is run the ball downhill on people and then play action off of it. They kind of stole what Arizona State did with Sam Leavitt a season ago. They allowed a guy like Cam Scadaboo to run all over teams, and when they needed to pass the ball, okay, fake the handoff, RPO action, or just straight play action, and throw the ball, Sam. It was a very, very tried-and-true method. BYU's done the same thing with Bear Bachmeier, but eventually, whether it's this season, next season, or sometime in relatively near future, we're going to see a game where, much like Iowa State, you may not have a running back, and you got to tell Bear Bachmeier, all right, the full playbook, the full passing game is open to you. Now we're going to really do dropbacks, seven-step drops. Excuse me. English, and we're going to really unleash the passing game. That's the final iteration of what we need to see this offense to really see, I think, in its full glory.
Do you get that this weekend against Texas Tech?
To a degree. We're expecting to see LJ Martin play in this game, and if he's anywhere near playable shape, you'll still see the same game plan where they're going to run the ball as much as they possibly can and play action off of it. But I do think you'll see some more straight passing game elements in this offensive play calling.
Look, teams don't love throwing the ball down the middle of the field unless it's a quick slant.
Yeah.
BYU is the exception to that. The way that Bear Bachmeier has found a third read 15 yards downfield in the middle of the field and not gotten his receivers killed and converted on third downs is the stuff of people. Again, they said it preseason, a couple rogue, I feel like they were rogue at the time, folks that were saying, oh, this is murmurs of Tim Tebow, freshman Tim Tebow. Dog, this is probably what they felt like when they watched freshman Tim Tebow. They were blown away by his performance for a guy who is this young. Bear Bachmeier looks like that. A-Rod made the right call alongside Kalani Sitake to make him the starting quarterback. I think a lot of the country, it's so odd, this optic of had McKay Hillstead been named the starter, maybe you get a little bit more hub from the media preseason, like, oh, it's a guy who's done this before. But because Bachmeier was a freshman, a lot of people threw the BYU season out the window and said there's no way they can win. Now the Cougars are a top 10 team. This weekend, we'll see that offense, Bear Bachmeier against David Bailey and Jacob Rodriguez and Texas Tech. I'm sure that Bachmeier knows they put their pants on the same way as anybody else, and it's going to be a heck of a clash. Hatch, before we let you go, and I know you'll give us this on college football kickoff as well. Do you have a final score prediction yet? I know it's still early enough in the week.
I have been bouncing back and forth on this. I'll just say this. I do think BYU covers whatever the spread is. I'm not at the point where I'm going to pick BYU to win quite yet, because I really do think this is the toughest game to date for BYU, but I do think they cover whatever the spread ends up being. I'll just say that.
That's going to be a fun one. That is Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars. This has been It Always Will Be. You can follow him on X at Jacob C. Hatch. This is Locked On. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. A crossover with Cougars and Dose Grande.